They say there's nothing quite like winter in the Ozarks. Fayetteville, Arkansas gets quiet in December. The university kids pack up and leave, the roads hush, and everything feels slower, softer. That year the snow came early and stayed longer than anyone liked. I remember the silence, the heavy kind that settles over your chest and makes you think too much. It was winter break, and I was 16, too old to believe in ghosts, too young to understand how real they can be. Not the kind with sheets or rattling chains, but the kind with old faces, bad history, and doors you thought you'd locked years ago. That Friday night, I was at Natalie Henderson's house, a blue-painted two-story at 619 North Hill Avenue. Her place had character, the kind you'd describe as charming if you didn't live there. Drafty windows, stairs that creaked like they had something to say, and walls that kept secrets even better than the people inside. Natalie and I weren't best friends, not really. I was new to town, still figuring out which hallways not to linger in at school, still being whispered about because my mom had moved us after a messy divorce. Natalie had been nice to me in that effortless way pretty girls are when they're bored and looking to feel generous, but I didn't mind. I needed someone. By 9, we were on the floor of her room with face masks drying and a bag of Totino's pizza rolls getting cold between us. We were scrolling TikTok, laughing too loudly at the dumbest videos, when her phone buzzed. Natalie went pale the second she saw the name. "Everything okay?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, just stared at the screen like it might reach out and bite her. Then she turned it to show me. Jonah Henderson. The message. "I'm nearby. I just need a place to crash. Don't tell Mom." She gave a little nervous laugh, like she was trying to pass it off. "Not supposed to be around. It's my brother. He's kind of..." "What do you mean, not supposed to be?" "He got kicked out last year. Things got bad." I didn't ask for details. I could feel them in the air. The kind of tension you recognize if you've ever lived in a house where you avoid the wrong tone of voice, where someone's anger is always a heartbeat away. "I'm not gonna reply," she said quickly, setting the phone down. "He probably won't even show up." At 11:12 p.m., someone knocked on the back door. We both looked at each other, every molecule in that room going stiff. The TV was still playing some video of a cat dancing to Beyoncé, but I couldn't hear it over the rush in my ears. Natalie stood up slowly. "Probably just someone looking for their dog or something," she muttered, but she was already heading down the stairs. I followed, against every instinct telling me not to. She peeked through the kitchen window and cursed under her breath. "It's Jonah." I stepped back. "What do you want to do?" "I'll just tell him to go," she said, already unlocking the deadbolt. "Natalie." She opened the door a few inches. "You can't be here." Jonah's voice was low, almost calm. "I just need some things, then I'm gone." And then he pushed the door open. He looked different from the photos on the fridge. Thinner, twitchier, like he'd been sleeping in his clothes for a while. His eyes didn't rest anywhere for long, and his hands kept flexing like they weren't attached to him. "Where's Dad?" he asked, already walking toward the stairs. "Jonah, please don't..." But he didn't listen. He was already halfway up, yelling. I grabbed Natalie's wrist. "We should call someone." She didn't move. Then upstairs, a crash, shattering glass, a scream. That's when we ran. We weren't thinking. We weren't even breathing right. Just 2 girls in pajamas and socks, slipping on ice-glazed porch steps and sprinting into the night like the cold couldn't touch us. Natalie didn't stop until we reached the neighbor's porch, a tidy little craftsman with yellow trim and wind chimes that jangled in the winter air. I pounded on the door. "Please, please open up." The porch light flicked on. A man in a bathrobe answered, bleary-eyed and blinking. "What's going on?" "Girls?" Natalie tried to speak but choked. I jumped in. "There's someone in the house. Her brother. He pushed in. He's fighting with her dad. He's got a knife, I think. Please call the police." He didn't ask questions. He pulled us inside and handed us a phone. My fingers fumbled the keypad, but I managed to call 911. The operator's voice was calm. Mine wasn't. I gave them the address and choked out what I could between shallow breaths. Natalie stood silent, staring at the neighbor's wall like she wasn't really there. Within 5 minutes, flashing red and blue lit up the street. We watched from the window as officers surrounded the house shouting commands through megaphones. The neighborhood stirred, curtains parted, porch lights flicked on, dogs barked. It felt like we were underwater, watching a scene unfold on mute. Natalie's mom came sprinting across the lawn in slippers, screaming her daughter's name. The police wouldn't let her near the house. Then came the real wait. Eventually, an officer walked over to the neighbor's door. Father's being taken to the ER for head trauma. He's in custody, no fatalities. Her Natalie collapsed into a chair and finally cried. They took Natalie to the hospital with her mom not long after. I stayed behind in the neighbor's living room, wrapped in a fleece blanket that smelled like cinnamon and dryer sheets. My mom showed up around 1 a.m., wide-eyed and breathless, after the police called her. I remember the way her hands shook when she touched my face like she needed to be sure I was really there. I didn't tell her the whole thing. I couldn't. Not yet. The next day, everything was different. School was still out, but word spread faster than snow melts in March. People talked. Even though nobody had the full story, it didn't stop the rumors. Some said Jonah had been homeless living in his car. Others whispered about drugs, about abuse, about years of secrets bubbling over. The official line was vague. A domestic disturbance involving a mentally unstable family member. But the truth lived in the pauses, in the way people looked at Natalie after. When I went to visit her a few days later, the house was different too, quieter. Her dad was still in the hospital with a fractured skull and a broken arm. Her mom was upstairs packing a bag to bring him clean clothes. Natalie sat on the living room couch, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the TV. The volume was off. The house still smelled faintly of blood and pine cleaner. "Hey," I said gently, sitting next to her. She nodded, but didn't smile. "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered. It wasn't the first time. I turned to her. "What do you mean?" Jonah used to snap. He'd hit walls, yell, but it was always behind closed doors. My parents kept saying he just needed time, that he'd grow out of it. Her voice broke a little. I used to believe them. We sat in silence for a while. Later, she told me she blamed herself for opening the door. But the truth is, what else do you do when your brother knocks? And he used to be the one who made you peanut butter sandwiches and taught you how to ride a bike. How do you say no to someone who shares your face in family photos? That night rewrote everything for her. And for me. Weeks passed. Winter deepened. Natalie stopped replying to texts. She didn't come to school when classes started up again. Rumor was she transferred. Something about wanting a fresh start. I couldn't blame her. But the silence stung more than I expected. We'd survived something terrible together. That used to mean something. I kept thinking back to the moment before it all changed. The warm room, pizza rolls on paper towels, our legs tangled in blankets while we laughed at dumb videos. How do you go from that to running barefoot in the snow with your heart slamming in your ears? I told myself I understood. Trauma does that. It makes people drift. But I still checked her socials now and then, even though she stopped posting. I even walked past her house once in February, just to see if the lights were on. They were, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place that remembered too much. Meanwhile, Jonah was still in the headlines. The police confirmed he had a history of mental illness. He wasn't formally charged. He was committed to a psychiatric facility upstate. There were no mugshots, just one blurry photo from a high school yearbook floating around online. He looked like any other teenager. That haunted me more than anything. You always expect monsters to look like monsters, but they usually don't. I started locking my bedroom door every night, started checking behind the shower curtain before I stepped in. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, but really I didn't feel safe anywhere anymore. I haven't talked to Natalie in over 2 years. She moved away, I think. Her family sold the house on Hill Avenue not long after everything happened. A real estate agent came by one day with a clipboard and a nervous smile. My mom told me the new owners painted over the blue with a sterile white and replaced the creaky steps. "Looks nice now," she said. But all I could think about was the sound of Jonah's voice from that stairwell, the glass shattering, the scream. People think horror is ghosts or shadows or haunted dolls, but the scariest thing I've ever experienced didn't come from some graveyard or cursed attic. It came from someone real, someone broken, someone familiar. And what stayed with me wasn't the violence. It was the fragility of everything we count on: family, safety, trust. All of it can fall apart in a single night. I never slept over at anyone's house again. Even now in college, I make excuses. I've got an early class, or I'm not feeling well. But the truth is, I still feel that cold air against my skin, still hear that knock, still see the way Natalie looked when she realized her brother wasn't just back. He was broken, and nobody had fixed it. Maybe some things can't be fixed, but they can be learned from. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones we're least prepared to protect ourselves from. And while forgiveness matters, so does awareness. Not every danger wears a stranger's face. And home doesn't mean safe just because it has a front door and a welcome mat. Be kind, be open, but never forget to be careful. There's something strange about the way we remember childhood. Not the big milestones or birthdays, but the small, quiet evenings that seemed forgettable at the time. A sleepover, a borrowed t-shirt, the smell of someone else's house. And yet, looking back, I can tell you the exact way the carpet felt on my bare feet that night, or how the shadows stretched across the kitchen floor just before everything changed. It was the start of winter break, 7th grade. December cold in Wichita Falls doesn't come with snow, but with wind, dry and sharp and angry. My friend Landon Burke had invited me to sleep over at his place on Taft Boulevard. He was the kind of kid who didn't talk much, but made you feel okay just being around him. His quiet was comfortable, never awkward. Landon's parents had split just that fall. His dad moved across town, and his mom, Candace, was doing everything she could to keep things normal. I didn't know the details, but I didn't have to. You could feel it in the way she hovered around us more than most moms, or how she always had something to prove in her smile. When I got there, she greeted me with a warm hug and a fake laugh. "Order whatever you boys want, okay? No bedtime tonight, go crazy." She tossed her phone onto the couch like we were grown-ups and walked off toward the kitchen with a glass of wine in her hand. We spent the first few hours the way middle schoolers do. Pizza from Marco's, Call of Duty, dumb jokes about girls we didn't actually talk to. It was easy in the way it's supposed to be when you're 12 and don't know how fragile that feeling is. Around 9:30, Landon went to grab more snacks. I wandered down the hall looking for the bathroom, but what I found instead stopped me cold. Candace was in the kitchen with a man I didn't recognize. He was older, maybe mid-40s, in a faded denim jacket and worn-out boots. I could smell the cigarettes on him from the hallway. They were standing too close, talking too low. Not quite kissing, but definitely not just talking. He saw me. Our eyes met. I mumbled something like, "Sorry," and turned away fast, retreating back to the living room like it never happened. When Landon came back with a bowl of popcorn, I didn't say anything. I just kept my eyes on the TV. But later, I overheard him ask his mom, "Is that guy staying the night again?" Her voice snapped sharp like a whip. "He's just a friend. Don't start." Landon didn't say another word. That was the moment the air shifted. I couldn't have known what was coming, but I felt the weight of something pressing down. Something unspoken and angry that didn't belong in a house full of video games and half-eaten pizza crusts. Something was about to break. Landon got quiet after that. Real quiet. We both kind of stopped trying to have fun. We still played video games, but neither of us really laughed. He lay on his side, texting someone under the blanket. I didn't ask who. I just watched the clock glow red in the dark. 10:45, 10:58, 11:06. At 11:10, headlights hit the living room curtains. A car door slammed, hard, then shouting. I sat up. What the hell was that? Landon was already scrambling toward the window. I followed. It was his dad. He was standing in the driveway, shouting Candace's name like it was a curse. His fists were clenched, chest heaving, like every ounce of him was held together by rage. Stay here, Landon said, but I grabbed his arm. No, don't go out there. Too late. The side door banged open. I could hear boots stomping down the hall. Candace tried to stop him, but I heard the thud, her being shoved aside. Where is he? His dad yelled. Where is that piece of... Landon froze. That's when I knew he wasn't mad about us. He was mad about the man in the denim jacket. I pulled Landon behind the couch. We crouched low, hearts hammering. Then, 3 sharp pops. Gunshots. Candace screamed. I felt Landon's breath catch beside me. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. Silence came next. That terrifying kind. No footsteps, no yelling. Just the heavy hum of the heater and the distant sound of someone crying. The next few minutes stretched like chewing gum, long and sticky and wrong. The man in the denim jacket was gone. He must have bolted out the back when the shouting started. Landon's dad was still in the hallway pacing, muttering things we couldn't make out. The sound of sirens came fast, like someone had already called before the shots even stopped echoing. Blue and red light filled the windows like a rave we didn't ask for. When the police arrived, they shouted commands through the door. Eventually, Landon's dad put down the gun and walked out with his hands up like he was expecting them. Like this wasn't his first time. They cuffed him on the porch while neighbors stood outside in robes and pajama pants, watching like it was TV. Nobody was hurt. That's what they told us. The shots had been aimed at the ceiling. A warning. Or maybe just a release. Candace collapsed on the steps, sobbing. One officer knelt beside her. Another came inside to talk to us. Landon didn't say anything. I just nodded when they asked questions. My parents picked me up early the next morning. I never went back to that house. Not for Landon's birthday, not for video games, not for anything. We texted a few times after Christmas, just enough to say we did. Then he stopped replying. Mom said Landon switched schools, somewhere across town. She didn't give me the name and I didn't ask. I figured that was her way of protecting me, even though I wasn't the one who'd been in the middle of it. But in a way, I had. That night changed everything for me. It was the first time I really saw how messy adults could be, how their pain could spill over into rooms where it didn't belong. Up until then, I thought parents had it together, that they knew things, that they were safe. But Candace had let that man in. And Landon's dad, he didn't just bring a gun into the house. He brought years of hurt with it. I wasn't scared of the weapon, I was scared of what it meant. That people could love each other one year and want to kill each other the next. That a front door doesn't always mean peace. That families fall apart and take you down with them. I still think about Landon sometimes. I wonder if he remembers hiding behind that couch, if he still hears those gunshots in his dreams. I wonder if he ever forgave either of them, his mom for lying, his dad for coming in with rage and bullets. I wonder if he ever learned to sleep through the night again. For me, sleepovers haven't felt the same since. Even now, years later, I still lock every door twice. I still flinch when I hear someone shout in the distance. People say you outgrow fear, that you move on. But some nights, when the wind howls outside and I'm lying awake at 3 a.m., I remember that crack in Landon's voice, the weight of his silence, and the truth that hit us both too early. Normal doesn't mean safe. Sometimes the scariest things don't come from outside the house. They come from the emotions adults never learn to control. And for kids caught in the middle, survival isn't about being brave. It's about realizing that sometimes love and danger share the same last name. I'd never been to a lake house before. That's the kind of sentence that sounds simple, almost innocent. But sometimes I wonder if that detail changed everything. If I'd known how still water could get at night, how deep quiet could feel in your bones, maybe I would have said no when Tyler invited me up for the weekend. But I didn't. I said yes. It was early spring break, just before the real heat started creeping in. My cousin Tyler and I were the same age, both 16, both in that weird place where we weren't kids anymore but not quite brave enough to admit we were scared of anything. His parents were away on some work retreat in Syracuse. They'd left him a stocked fridge, a landline that didn't work anymore, and full permission to have one friend over. I guess I was the safest bet. We got there Saturday morning, but nothing really started until Sunday night. The lake house sat on a quiet road called Lakeshore Drive, all the way down the bend where the trees grew thicker and cell signal turned into nothing. The house itself wasn't fancy, but it had big windows that looked out over the water and that kind of silence you only find in places far from grocery stores and stoplights. I remember walking in and thinking the house smelled like cedar and lake mud, kind of damp but clean, safe. By sunset, we'd already polished off half a bag of popcorn, taken turns yelling at Tyler's ancient Xbox, and opened a can of Sprite that exploded all over his hoodie. We were laughing. The dumb kind of laughing that only happens when there's nothing serious going on and no one around to judge you. I remember thinking how weirdly peaceful it felt. And then just after 8:40 there was a knock at the front door. We both froze. You don't get knocks out there. There's no one to knock. Tyler glanced at me, brows raised. You expecting someone? Yeah, I said dryly. I gave all my lake friends the address. He stood up and walked to the front window, peeled back the curtain. There was a girl standing on the porch. She looked maybe 14 with long, wet hair hanging around her face. She was wearing a windbreaker that looked too thin for the cold, and jeans that clung like they'd been soaked. I remember the way she stood, perfectly still, not shivering, not hugging herself, just waiting. I followed Tyler to the door, but I hung back. Something felt off. He cracked it open just enough to speak through. Hey, are you okay? My car broke down, the girl said. Her voice was small, almost robotic. Can I use your phone? Tyler looked back at me, shrugged a little. There's no service out here, no bars. She nodded. Can I come in and wait? That was when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Her voice didn't change. No urgency, no fear, just flat, rehearsed. No offense, I said, trying to sound gentle up the road. But we can't let strangers in. Maybe try the house. She stared at me for a long second, then stepped back. She didn't argue, didn't ask again. Just vanished into the dark, swallowed by the shadows between porch light and forest line. We shut the door, locked it. Tyler pulled the curtain aside again to peek. She's still out there, he whispered. But she's not alone. I moved beside him and looked. I didn't see the girl anymore. Just two tall figures standing near the edge of the trees, not moving, not saying anything, just there. And that's when it started. The feeling that something wasn't just outside, it was already watching us. We didn't speak for a few seconds after the girl vanished. Not really. Tyler kept the curtain slightly pulled, his eyes locked on the trees like he was trying to will the shadows to stay still. I leaned closer, squinting. I thought I saw movement just barely, like two shapes drifting just past the reach of the porch light. You saw that too, right? I asked, voice low. Tyler didn't look away. Yeah, not animals either. Too tall. I backed away from the window, suddenly aware of how exposed we were. The entire back wall was glass, beautiful during the day, terrifying now. All that space, all that dark. Anyone could be standing just beyond it, watching. I grabbed my phone from the counter. One bar. It flickered and vanished. Then came the words I didn't want to see. No service. Tyler tossed his phone on the couch in frustration. Wi-Fi up here. But nope. Nature time. This is why I told my parents we needed, do we have a landline? He shook his head. Them anyway. Disconnected years ago. My dad says it's pointless when no one answers great. We double-checked the locks on the front and back doors. They were old, but sturdy. The kind that made a heavy clunk when you turned them. We even slid the deadbolt and wedged a wooden broom handle through the back slider for good measure. I'm not sure why we felt the need to do that. Just instinct. That's when we heard it. Faint at first. A scrape. Not on the front door. The side of the house. We looked at each other. Neither of us said it. We just moved, quiet, slow, toward the kitchen window that faced the narrow gravel path between the cabin and the woods. Nothing. Just black trees and wind moving through the branches. Then a second scrape. Louder. Closer. Tyler hissed through his teeth. I think someone's circling the house. I opened a drawer, fumbling for something, anything, and came up with a steak knife. Not exactly comforting, but better than nothing. Tyler grabbed a fire poker from beside the old wood stove. We stood there, back to back in the middle of the living room like we were waiting for something to break through the wall. And then it stopped. Silence. A thick, unnatural kind of silence. No footsteps. No voices. Just the faint hum of wind and water outside. I glanced at the clock on the microwave. 9:51 p.m., less than an hour since that girl knocked. We moved toward the stairs. Tyler motioned for me to follow him up. The second floor was mostly bedrooms and a small loft that overlooked the lake. If we had to hide or see what was going on from higher ground, that was the place to do it. Halfway up the stairs, I paused. There was something on the carpet. A wet footprint. Small. Bare. I pointed. Tyler turned pale. That wasn't there earlier, he said. We reached the top, stepping carefully. Tyler's room was on the right, overlooking the driveway. I followed him in, heart pounding. We peeked out the front window. Nothing. Not even the girl. That should have been a relief, but it wasn't. Okay, Tyler whispered, gripping the poker like it would actually help. The doors again. What do we do if they try? I didn't answer. Because at that moment, something happened that made my stomach drop. From downstairs, through the closed door came a soft, steady voice. Childlike. Off-key. A girl singing. You should have let me in. We didn't breathe. We didn't blink. That voice, singing that awful little tune, rose just enough to cut through the silence, soft and wrong. Like it was made for a music box that hadn't been wound in years. Tyler mouthed the words. What the hell is that? I shook my head slowly, too afraid to speak. He stepped toward the bedroom door, quietly locking it, as if that would do anything. We both stood there, backs pressed to the far wall, our shadows shaking on the ceiling from the weak overhead bulb. You should have let me in. It stopped, and that was worse than the singing. We waited. 10 seconds. 30. A full minute. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate. Not from downstairs anymore. They were in the walls. The floor beneath us creaked, once, then again. Soft thuds like someone stepping barefoot down the hallway just outside Tyler's room. He mouthed again, bathroom, go. We moved together, grabbing the flashlight from his nightstand and my phone, even though I knew it still had no service. The upstairs bathroom was small but had no windows, only one door, and it locked. Tyler stepped in first, then pulled me in and shut it tight behind us. The air in that bathroom was thick with the scent of old shampoo and mildew. I sat on the floor and wrapped my arms around my knees while Tyler stood near the door, holding that fire poker like it was Excalibur. We stayed like that for over an hour. No sounds, no footsteps, just the occasional gust of wind rattling the cabin. Around 11:30 p.m., I dozed off. Not because I wasn't scared, my body had just hit the wall. My brain flickered out like a light bulb burning too long. I woke up to something brushing my shoulder. Tyler, whispering. Someone's in the house again. I blinked the sleep out of my eyes. The flashlight was still on, glowing faintly, casting just enough light to see Tyler's face pale as paper. Then I heard it too. Not singing this time. Breathing. Right outside the door. The breathing stopped after 30 seconds. But 30 seconds of someone standing silently outside a locked door, breathing just loud enough for you to hear it, that's long enough to change how your brain processes fear. Tyler reached down slowly, gripping the doorknob. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "I'm checking if they're still there." "Are you insane?" "I need to know." He cracked the door, just an inch, barely enough to peek. Empty hallway, no shadows, no breathing, no footsteps running away. He stepped into the hall. I followed. We crept back into his bedroom, where the window still faced the front yard. He opened the curtain just slightly, the flashlight's glow bouncing off the glass. No one there. But something new was. Scrawled across the porch in big looping letters, drawn in red chalk like from a schoolyard, were 4 words. "You were smart this time." The flashlight trembled in Tyler's hand. I whispered, "Is that chalk yours?" He shook his head. "I haven't had chalk since I was 10. We watched the front yard for 20 more minutes. Nothing moved. No more figures, no girl, no strangers in the trees. Just the lake, still and black under the moonlight. Tyler slumped onto his bed. "I don't think they ever left." "What do you mean?" He looked up at me. "I think they were always here. We didn't leave the bathroom again that night. Not really. We made one last sweep of the cabin, checked every window, every lock, and then barricaded the bedroom door with the dresser and Tyler's desk. We curled up on the floor and kept the flashlight between us like it could keep whatever was out there away. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. Because when I opened my eyes, morning light was bleeding through the window and birds were chirping like nothing had happened. Tyler was already up, standing by the front door with the fire poker still clutched in his hand. I stepped outside slowly, half expecting the chalk message to be gone. It wasn't. The words were still there, smudged a little by the early dew, but unmistakable. "You were smart this time." We walked the perimeter of the house. No footprints, no sign of forced entry, not even broken branches. The police showed up an hour later after Tyler finally drove us into town to use a store's landline. They searched the house, every room, every crawl space. Found nothing. But the attic, that's where things got worse. There was a back corner behind a plywood panel covered with insulation. Inside, they found an empty sleeping bag, candy wrappers, a dirty cup, and a pile of clothes that didn't belong to anyone in Tyler's family. No DNA match, no fingerprints, no sign of a break-in. They said whoever it was might have been living in the walls or attic for weeks, maybe months, watching, waiting. The scariest part wasn't that someone tried to get in. It's that someone had never left. We never went back to that lake house. Tyler's family sold it later that year. They told people it was just too isolated, too quiet, the kind of place where storms cut you off from the world. But I know the real reason. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't the woods. It was that voice, that knock, that girl with the flat voice and the too still posture. It was knowing that someone knew we were alone, that someone rehearsed a lie so calmly, so perfectly, hoping we'd just open the door and invite them in. And what haunts me the most is the message. You were smart this time. Because that means there was going to be a next time. And maybe next time, we wouldn't be. Sometimes the scariest threats aren't the loud ones breaking in. They're the quiet ones already inside, learning your patterns, waiting for the right night to knock. Trust your instincts, and never ignore the stillness between sounds. That's when they move. Looking back, I'm still not sure what I was looking for in that cabin. Escape, maybe. A break from school, from my dad's quiet since the divorce, from the noise of my own head. So when my friend Andrew invited me to spend fall break at his grandparents' lakeside cabin on Long Ridge Trail, I didn't hesitate. 7th grade carried its own kind of pressure, and being home that last weekend before winter break didn't feel like relief. It felt like a waiting room. But in that last week of October, the Duluth woods were pure escape. Crisp air, red and orange leaves stained the ground, and the lake stretched beyond the dock like a mirror that swallowed the sky. Andrew was the kind of friend who didn't need to fill silence. You felt comfortable just sitting near him, no words required. We knew each other by class, but this was different. A weekend cut off from everything, just us and a VHS collection. When we arrived, his mom waved and left us with a quick, "Be back Tuesday, don't break anything," then disappeared into the commute back to town. The cabin looked like a time capsule. Wood paneling, faded plaid curtains, a creek running through the floorboards near the kitchen. Dust motes hung in the slanted beams undisturbed. That first night we lit a fire, roasted s'mores by the hearth, and watched some cheesy creature feature on an old tube TV. It was easy, not forced. We joked over burnt marshmallows, drank too much hot chocolate, and left the fire glowing long after the movie credits rolled. I fell asleep to the sound of wind rattling the glass and the comforting crackle of embers. Honestly, I felt safe. More than safe. I felt at peace. But sometimes peace is just the quiet before something shifts. We woke early the next morning to a cloudless sky and wood smoke drifting in through the cracked window. That day we fished, played old board games, and explored the trail serpentine around the lake. I took pictures on Andrew's grandpa's old Nikon, not to post, but just because I wanted to capture this. That night, after dinner and stories around the fire, we gave the VHS tapes another round. Andrew picked one with a peeling label and we watched, but my mind wandered. I felt tension, not between us, but under the floorboards, in the stale wood. I used the bathroom again and saw it, a narrow door tucked behind an old coat rack near the hallway's end. I paused because at first I didn't notice it. It hadn't been there the night before. Had it? I stepped closer. There was no doorknob, just a latch, tight and firmly closed. "Hey," I called. Andrew switched the tape. "That back there, what's behind it?" He didn't answer right away. I heard the tape click into place. Finally, he said over his shoulder, "Never go in there. Grandpa used it for hunting equipment. Doors locked tight." I nodded, uneasy. When I lay down later, I thought about how his tone had been flat, not warning, just fact. Like that door was a necklace he'd taken off and shoved somewhere. Later, I swore I heard something creak, just a whisper of movement. Old wood shifting under nothing. I assumed it was normal, but it wasn't a creak you ignored. It was a creak that made you hold your breath. I stayed awake for a while, hearing nothing else. In morning's pale light, I thought it better to say nothing. We packed up coffee mugs and goodbyed the lake for now. But something weakened that safe pause, like the foundation had cracked. Sunday afternoon was lazy. Board games, card decks thumbing under our fingers. Afternoons of silence broken by a joke or two. We were tired from the early morning chill and the sun slipping behind tall pines. We kept the fire low, built the coziest mess of sleeping bags and blankets at the foot of the couch. Around 9:20 that evening, after one last round of Uno, I noticed the hallway door again. I blinked and told Andrew I needed water. He gestured toward the kitchen. The flashlight sat on the counter. I took it but paused in the hallway. The latch was cracked. I stared without moving. That same door, once closed, barely open. My stomach dropped. I flicked on the light and crept forward, whispering, "Andrew, this door." He followed a second later. Light hit the room, wide enough for a single bed, maybe 5 by 8 feet, with egg crack paint and a broken swirl. I could see drag marks, parallel grooves across the dusty floor like something heavy had been moved in darkness. But it was the chair that broke me. A small wooden rocking chair placed in the far corner, moving slightly. No breeze, no open window, no reason for that chair to move. I whispered, "Don't." He said, "We get help." We bolted, locked the kitchen and back door, checked windows. We piled on the couch, huddled under blankets, wide awake, breathing. Time crawled. Every cracked board, every whisper of wind had me tensing. We stayed silent, eyes fixed on the locked hallway door. Sleep didn't arrive. Morning crept in slowly, sun filtered gray and cold. I held the flashlight under me, afraid of the dark we couldn't see. When light found the room, shadows retreated. Andrew went to the hallway door and ripped it open. Nothing. Just bare wood walls and peeling wallpaper. No chair. No tracks. No sign anyone or anything had been in there. We sat down hard in the kitchen, hearts still rattling. "What was it?" I whispered. He shook his head. I thought about not telling. But hours later at dinner, Andrew's grandma arrived. She hugged us stiffly, gave me a polite smile and said, "Your grandpa built that room decades ago, but we never used it after 1983. I locked onto her words. Then she looked at Andrew, tears in her eyes. "That room, your great-uncle disappeared in there. I had it nailed shut after that." Silence held us. "We thought decades would let us forget," she said, voice low. "We never reopened it." I left that cabin with a weight in my chest, like a secret I didn't own but carried anyway. I never went back. Not for Abby's birthday. Not to finish the tapes. Not to figure out what forced that chair to rock. Back in school, the days moved again. Friend groups, classes, cell phones buzzing. Everything looked shiny, but I carried that silence inside me. I began locking my bedroom door, double-checking windows, counting floorboards as I walked. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I believed in things that don't make sense. In places we're better off leaving alone. In quiet terrors behind closed doors. When life got loud, I'd feel that cabin's hush, that rocking chair in the dark. That question, how do you face what's waiting behind a door you never should have opened? And what do you do when you go back and find the door still closed? Fear doesn't always come from what chases us. Sometimes it comes from what's waiting quietly behind a door you shouldn't open. And wisdom isn't always about courage. It's about knowing when the silence holds more truth than answers. I remember the night like it's stitched into my bones. It was the kind of cold that made your teeth ache and your breath stick to your collar. Pine Hollow, Montana, doesn't get a lot of attention, but when winter rolls in early, it rolls in hard. Snow was already piling up by the time we got off the school bus that Thursday in November, and the sky had the bruised look it gets right before a heavy storm. Mason lived in a trailer with his mom at lot number 7 in Silver Birch Trailer Park, a patchy row of mobile homes on the south edge of town. Not much to look at. Chain-link fences, crooked satellite dishes, plastic lawn chairs half buried in snow. But compared to my place, it was paradise. His mom made real dinners, not the kind you microwave and eat with a plastic fork. She smiled when she talked, and she didn't flinch when people raised their voices. Mason and I had only been hanging out for a couple weeks. We'd been paired up for a project in social studies, and he was the first kid who didn't seem to care that I wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row. When he invited me to crash at his place for a sleepover, I told him yeah before he even finished asking. That night after dinner, we built a couch cushion fort in the living room. His mom even helped us drape a blanket over the top. She made cocoa and popcorn and let us pick the movie. It felt so weird to be somewhere that didn't smell like old beer and motor oil. We watched Back to the Future on VHS, played Go Fish with bent cards, and passed an old pair of earbuds back and forth, listening to classic rock Mason had pirated off LimeWire. By 10:30, Mason was out cold, curled up on the mattress with a throw blanket. I couldn't sleep. I never really could in other people's houses. My body always stayed alert, like it was waiting for something to go wrong. I stayed up watching the static from the old TV flicker in the dark, feeling almost safe. That was until I heard the knock. 3 soft taps, slow, measured, familiar. It was the kind of knock that didn't belong. Not at that hour, not in that quiet. I sat up slowly, heart hammering like a trapped bird in my chest. It came from the front door, just beyond the sheet we'd hung for our fort. I waited. Nothing followed. No voice, no footsteps, no jiggling of the knob. Just silence. I knew that rhythm. I'd heard it 1,000 times before. Always at night, always followed by the sound of keys hitting the floor, the scrape of boots being kicked off, and then shouting. My dad had a way of knocking that never seemed like a request to come in. It was a warning. I stood up, pushed the blanket aside, and tiptoed to the small living room window. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek out. Snow, wind, empty steps. No one was there. I shook my head, told myself I was just being paranoid. Old ghosts knocking on new doors. I crawled back into the fort, pulled the blanket over my face, and tried to bury the memory. 10 minutes later, the knock came again. This time it was at the back door. "Mason," I whispered, shaking his shoulder. "Wake up, man. Someone's outside." He blinked at me, groggy. "What?" "There's someone out there." They knocked again. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Did you see anyone?" "No, but it was the same knock. First the front, now the back." His mom was still awake in her room. When we told her, she grabbed a flashlight and checked both doors. The snow was falling heavier now, but she didn't see anyone. "Probably the wind," she said, then gave Mason a hug and told us to get some sleep. She wasn't lying to us, just doing what parents do. Protect first, believe later. When she went back to bed, I walked over to the back door. My skin went cold. There in the snow, just a few feet from the steps, were prints. Bare footprints. No shoes. Just toes and heels pressed into the powder. "Someone's messing with us," Mason said. I couldn't answer. I didn't have the words for what I was feeling. I didn't sleep. I just laid there, ears tuned to every creak and gust outside. At around 3 a.m. I heard something. Not footsteps, not knocking. A scraping. Like nails or maybe branches dragging against the trailer siding. I clenched my fists under the blanket. Every part of me screamed to wake Mason again, but I didn't move. Maybe it'd go away if I stayed still enough. Maybe it wouldn't notice me. Then, whispering. Not words. Just sound. Like breath behind a door. I pulled the blanket over my head and whispered to myself over and over, no matter what. "Don't open the door." I thought about my dad. The nights when I'd hide under my bed, his drunken rants echoing down the hallway. My mom always said, "Don't draw attention, he'll calm down." But he never did. He'd knock. Same rhythm. Always 3 times. Not rushed, not angry, just final. That knock had followed me here, or maybe it never left. Around 5 a.m. I finally drifted into a kind of half-sleep. I was still wrapped tight in the blanket, Mason snoring softly a few feet away. The trailer creaked like it was trying to stretch after a long night. When the sun started to rise, everything looked softer, lighter, like the danger had passed. But when we stepped outside that morning, the snow told a different story. There were more footprints now, long smears in the snow, like someone had slipped or crawled. They led from the woods behind the trailer straight to the back steps. The bare feet were red in the middle, the color of frozen blood. Whoever had been out there didn't come from a neighbor's house. They came from the trees. Mason's mom called the cops. 2 deputies showed up around 9 a.m., both bundled in tan jackets, coffee steaming in their hands. They looked around, took photos, asked a few questions, but their faces never really changed. This was just another weird small-town call to them. No signs of forced entry, no damage. Could have been a transient or a drunk, one of them said. Wearing no shoes in 20 degrees? Mason's mom snapped. Could have been on something, or he shrugged. They left after telling her to keep the doors locked and call again if anything else happened. That was it. That was all we got. That afternoon, Mason and I helped his mom install a camera above both doors. She wasn't about to wait for answers that might never come. I didn't stay for dinner. I walked home before dark, hood pulled low and steps quick. My house was quiet. My dad was passed out on the couch, half a bottle of wild turkey on the floor. My mom was in the kitchen, staring out the window like she was watching for snow that hadn't started yet. I didn't say anything. I just went to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed. I looked at the wall and remembered the knock. 3 slow taps. And I knew deep down it didn't matter where I went if I was afraid it would find me. A few weeks later, I told a school counselor what happened. I didn't tell her everything, just the parts that didn't make me sound crazy. The knock, the footprints, the fear. But then I told her about my dad, about hiding under the bed, about how I used to count the knocks and try to guess if it was going to be a bad night or just a loud one. Sometimes I still hear it in my dreams. 3 soft taps, like something asking if it's okay to come inside when it already has the key. She nodded, asked good questions, gave me space to talk. She didn't dismiss me or call my mom or act like it wasn't real. That's when I learned that not everything that knocks is a person. Sometimes it's memory. Sometimes it's trauma, disguised in new faces, new places, but it still knows your name. I never stayed over at Mason's again. We stayed friends for a while, but something changed. Maybe he could tell I wasn't the same after that. Maybe I couldn't pretend I was. Now I don't stay the night anywhere unless there are 2 exits, and I never open a door unless someone says their name first. I don't know who or what was outside that night. Maybe it was just some unstable guy from the woods. Maybe it was a ghost. Maybe it was just the shape of my father's shadow finding new ways to haunt me. But I know this. Not every monster kicks the door down. Some of them knock first, quietly, politely, just to see if you'll answer. Fear doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears memory. And learning where your fear comes from is the first step in knowing how to keep it out. If you'd asked me back then why I invited Jordan Reed over that night, I probably would have said it was for the sleepover, or the games, or because my mom made those microwavable mini tacos we both liked. But if I'm being honest now, it was mostly because I felt bad for him. Jordan wasn't the kind of kid anyone invited to things. He was quiet, twitchy, always looking over his shoulder like he expected someone to be there. And after his parents split up that spring, it got worse. He'd sit alone at lunch, barely talk in class. He'd started biting the side of his thumb until it bled. I noticed stuff like that, even when others didn't. So when I mentioned it to my mom, she didn't hesitate. "Bring him over Friday. We'll do a movie night," she said, already pulling out extra blankets for the fold-out couch. She was like that, always trying to fix what she could, even if it didn't stay fixed for long. We lived in this small, second-floor apartment at 4911 East 8th Avenue in Spokane Valley. A quiet complex, not fancy, not rough, just a row of buildings with identical beige siding and chain-link fencing around the parking lot. Our unit had a little balcony and a living room window that faced another building about 30 feet across the lot. You could see into some of the other apartments if their blinds were open, and sometimes when it got late, you'd catch a flicker of someone else's TV or a shadow walking past their kitchen. Jordan got dropped off around 6:30. My mom gave us pizza, soda, and a ton of snacks. She was smiling the whole time, but I could tell she was watching Jordan carefully. Not in a bad way, more like she was trying to measure how far gone he already was. By 9, we were shoulder deep in a video game marathon, yelling and laughing like actual normal kids for once. It felt good, but I kept noticing how Jordan's eyes would drift, past the screen, past me, toward the window. Always that window. "You good?" I finally asked. He hesitated, fingers still on the controller. "That guy across the lot, he watches me." I looked out. The window he pointed to was dark, the blinds drawn. Nothing. "There, man. There's no one. There was," he said, voice small. "Every day this week." I didn't say anything after that, just turned the volume up and passed him a soda. Around midnight, I got up to hit the bathroom. I was maybe gone 2 minutes tops. When I came back, Jordan wasn't on the couch anymore. He was standing in the middle of the living room, eyes wide, face drained of all color. "He was just there," he whispered. I followed his stare to the window. "What? Who?" "In the window. The guy." I saw his face this time. I went over and pulled back the curtain just a little. Nothing. The apartment across the lot looked the same. Dark, empty, dead. My stomach twisted a little, but I didn't want him to see that. "You sure you're not just tired?" "I'm not making it up," he said, his voice breaking. He was smiling. That word stuck with me. Smiling. Not watching, not glaring. Smiling. I got my mom. She came out, half asleep, asking what was going on. I explained, Jordan silent beside me. She did the mom thing, checked the locks, looked out the window, turned on the porch light. "It's all clear," she said gently. "Probably just a shadow. Your mind fills in the blanks when it's late." We closed the blinds and killed the lights. Jordan laid back down on the couch but didn't close his eyes. I watched him pretend to sleep, his hands clenching the blanket tight. I didn't say it out loud, but part of me started to believe him. I woke up at 2:37 a.m., not to a dream, not to a noise inside. It was the sound of tapping, soft, rhythmic, from the balcony door. Tap, tap, tap. 3 times, perfectly spaced, not rushed, not frantic, just patient. I sat up, heart frozen in my chest. Jordan was already awake. His eyes were wide, fixed on the glass door. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just listened. Tap, tap, tap. Then nothing. I forced myself to stand. My legs were jelly. My throat felt dry. I wanted to wake my mom, but I couldn't stop looking at the glass. The blinds were half closed, swaying slightly like they'd been brushed. Jordan whispered, "He's here." I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't want to. I finally ran to my mom's room, nearly tripping over the blanket. She bolted up the second she saw my face. I told her someone was at the balcony. She grabbed her phone, opened the door, and stepped out onto the tiny concrete pad. Empty. Nothing but night and silence. A few minutes later, the police showed up. Flashlights, questions. They checked every door and window. No forced entry. No footprints on the balcony. "Probably a prank," one officer said. "We get a lot of that around this time of year." Jordan didn't argue. He just sat on the couch staring at the glass. The officers left with a promise to drive through the complex again later. My mom apologized. Jordan didn't respond. He just asked if we could close every curtain. We did. The next morning was bright and clean and quiet, like none of it had happened. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in tiny golden beams, lighting up the dust in the air. My mom made pancakes. Jordan didn't eat. While she cleaned up, I wandered back to the balcony. I don't know why. I guess I wanted to convince myself it was nothing, that the tapping was a branch or the wind or even some stupid prank. That's when I saw it, a handprint, right there on the glass, smudged, greasy, not huge, more like a teenager's, but clear, the kind of handprint you don't get from outside in cold air. It was on the inside. I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't call my mom. I just stood there, staring. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't the night before. Jordan hadn't brought fear with him. He'd brought attention. Whatever it was, whoever it was, it had been looking through his windows for days. And now, it had found a new one. He left that afternoon. Quiet. Tired. No thank you, no goodbye. Just gone. A month later, I heard he'd transferred schools. Moved in with his dad somewhere outside of Tacoma. I never saw him again. I still live in Spokane Valley. We moved to a different apartment when I started high school, but not far from that place. Every once in a while, I drive by 4911 East 8th. It's just a building, just beige siding and small balconies. But I can't look at it without feeling like someone is staring back. After that night, I stopped sleeping near windows. I use blackout curtains now. I keep them shut tight even during the day. It's not the dark I'm scared of. It's what watches from the other side of the glass. People say fear fades with time, but that's only half true. The details blur, sure, but the feeling, that never really goes, especially when you know what you saw. when you know what followed you home. I sometimes wonder if Jordan ever found peace. If wherever he ended up, the windows stayed empty. Or maybe he learned the same thing I did, that some guests don't knock, they don't break in. They just wait. Wait for you to stop looking, to stop paying attention. Wait for the moment the curtain slips just enough to find your eyes. And when they see you, they never forget. Sometimes the scariest things don't come from outside. They come from what we carry with us, and what we unknowingly let in when we think no one's watching. I didn't know Callie Pearson all that well when she invited me over. She sat 2 seats behind me in English, always alone, always quiet. Her jeans were too short for her ankles, and her sweaters looked like they came from the lost and found bin. Not in a mean way, just worn, like everything she owned had been through a second life before it landed on her. She never raised her hand in class, never smiled much, and she always left lunch early, tray half full. We weren't friends, not really. More like neighbors in the same hallway who nodded sometimes. So when she turned to me after school that Tuesday and asked, "Do you want to come over tomorrow night? Just to hang out, do homework or whatever?" I didn't know what to say at first. It felt sudden, out of nowhere. But she looked nervous when she asked, eyes low, fingers pulling at the frayed cuff of her sleeve. I told her I'd ask my parents. My mom said yes without thinking. School break, right? Just make sure her folks are okay with it. She handed me a tote bag and tossed in my toothbrush, phone charger, a sweater. When we pulled off Highway 9 onto Riverbend Road the next evening, the light was already fading. The farther we drove, the quieter it got. No gas stations, no traffic, just flat land and the silhouette of a rusted grain silo in the distance. The Pearson farmhouse sat alone at the end of a dirt drive. White paint peeled from the siding. One of the shutters hung crooked, clapping softly in the wind. It looked tired. Callie was waiting on the porch when we pulled up. She didn't wave, just opened the screen door and stepped aside. Inside, it smelled like bleach and something else, something old, like wet insulation or old wood trying to rot. The hallway was dark, and every door was closed except one at the end. "My room's this way," she said quickly. I didn't see her parents at first. We passed the living room and I caught a glimpse of a man slouched in a recliner, staring blankly at a muted TV. The light from the screen flickered across his face, but he didn't turn. At the kitchen table, a woman sat cradling a chipped mug in both hands. She didn't look up either. No hello, no questions, just silence. "They're tired," Callie mumbled. Dinner was microwaved beans, cold toast, and tap water. We ate in her room, sitting cross-legged on a carpet that looked like it had seen a few too many dogs. Her walls were mostly bare except for one faded poster of horses. "We can do homework later," she said. "Want a color?" She pulled out a tin of crayons and a stack of old printer paper. We didn't talk much, just scratched out little cartoons and flowers. It was quiet, too quiet, like the whole house was holding its breath. Then came the bang. Not close, but loud enough to make me flinch. A thud from the hallway followed by a muffled yell. Callie didn't even look up. "Just don't go out there," she said calmly, like she'd said it before. "They'll stop soon." We stayed in her room for another hour after that. I didn't ask questions. Something in me knew not to. I just kept coloring, even though my hand had gone numb and I couldn't focus. At some point, we put on a DVD, an old copy of Matilda with a scratched cover. Callie sat on the edge of the bed while I curled up in a blanket on the floor. Neither of us really watched. At around 11:30, I must have dozed off. I woke up to a soft sound, steady, low crying. Not loud enough to panic me, just enough to make me sit up and listen. The room was dark. The TV was off. Callie was gone. "Callie?" I whispered. No answer. I stood and followed the sound. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was closer, inside the room. Then I noticed the closet door cracked open, a faint beam of light slipping out onto the floor. I opened it slowly. Callie was sitting on a pile of blankets, flashlight in one hand, a photo album in her lap. She looked up at me with swollen eyes and blinked. "Sorry," she said, wiping her nose. "Didn't mean to wake you." I crouched down beside her. "Why are you in here?" "I sleep here sometimes," she said, "when they get weird." I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I had a sense. The kind you feel in your gut when something's not right, even if nobody's told you why. "They don't bother me if I'm quiet," she added. I sat beside her. She handed me the flashlight, then opened the album and flipped a few pages. It was filled with pictures, some faded Polaroids, some blurry phone prints, birthday cakes, Christmas mornings, little kids smiling with missing teeth. "These are my brothers," she said. "Daniel and Eli. They ran away last year." She said it like it was a fact, not a tragedy. I could barely speak. "You don't talk about them?" "Not really. They left a note, said they'd had enough. Haven't heard anything since." I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing I could. "Do you want me to stay in here with you?" She nodded. We sat shoulder to shoulder in the dark, the flashlight resting on the album between us. The walls felt thinner inside the closet, like I could hear every creak and shuffle from the hallway. Callie pulled the blanket around her shoulders like a cape. I followed her lead. We didn't speak again that night. I didn't sleep much. I don't think she did either. The air in the closet got colder the longer we sat, and the light from the flashlight dimmed until it was just a soft yellow glow. Every few minutes I thought I heard footsteps, maybe outside the room, maybe inside my own head. When the sun finally rose, it painted the floorboards gold through a sliver between the curtains. We crawled out of the closet without saying anything. I felt stiff, like my bones had aged overnight. I didn't want breakfast. I didn't want to see her parents again, not even in passing. I didn't want to sit at their kitchen table while her mom stared into her coffee and her dad ignored everything around him like he was underwater. "I think I need to go," I said. Callie didn't argue. "Okay." She walked me to the porch while I called my mom. She answered on the second ring. "Baby, everything okay?" "Hey, can you come get me?" I said. "I just don't feel good." By the time her car rolled up the drive, I was already standing at the end of it, clutching my bag like a shield. My mom waved to Callie, who stood on the porch with her arms crossed. She didn't smile. Once we were back on the highway, my mom glanced over. "You're awfully quiet. Bad night?" I took a deep breath. "I think something's wrong in that house." She slowed the car just a little. "Wrong how?" I told her everything, not just the closet or the crying or the photo album. I told her about the yelling in the hallway, about the microwave beans for dinner, about the way Callie's dad never blinked. I didn't know what I was hoping for, maybe reassurance, maybe denial. But when we got home, my mom made a phone call. A week later, a counselor pulled me from gym class. They sat me in a small office with a window that didn't open and asked me to repeat everything I'd told my mom. They took notes. They nodded. They asked me to describe the house, the dinner, the noise in the hallway. I felt sick the whole time, like I was betraying a secret I hadn't been meant to know. 3 days after that, Callie stopped showing up to school. Rumors spread fast. By the time Monday rolled around, everyone had a version. Her parents got arrested. Her little brother got taken. They found bruises on her arms. Most of it was speculation, but one thing turned out to be true. Callie and her younger brother were placed in foster care. The house on Riverbend went quiet. I never saw her again. I'm 24 now. Some nights, I still dream about that closet. The smell of old blankets and crayon wax. The weight of the flashlight in my lap. I hear Callie breathing beside me, calm but careful. Like even in sleep, she knew she had to stay still to stay safe. I've learned not all monsters hide in the dark. Some live in plain sight. Some wear flannel robes and drink coffee and tell you they're just tired. Some sit in the next room while their children sleep in closets with photo albums instead of teddy bears. I don't know where Callie is now. Maybe she made it somewhere better. Maybe she finally found a room where she could leave the closet door open without fear. I hope so. But I carry her story with me. Because that night taught me something no textbook ever could. Some homes teach you fear before they teach you love. But sometimes speaking up, no matter how small your voice feels, is what saves someone who's forgotten they deserve saving. I consider myself a practical person. I pay my bills on time, keep a decent social life, and try not to worry when things go wrong. So when the morning news flashed warnings of a citywide blizzard, I strapped on snowshoes, stocked my pantry, and settled in. And then my heater gave up. Just like that. On a Tuesday morning, the pipes froze, radiators clanged, and the temperature in my apartment nosedived. I called the maintenance office twice. I emailed our landlord. I even banged on the radiator like a madwoman. No one answered. Meanwhile, my daughter, Daisy, only 6, wrapped herself in every teddy bear she owned and whispered, "Do you think Santa can fix our heater?" I forced a laugh, handed her a cup of lukewarm tea and told her, "Maybe we'll make a Christmas miracle." But I felt the panic in her eyes, and I shared it secretly. That's when I saw Jared next door. He's lived in that basement suite for a few years. Quiet, helpful. Sometimes he'd shovel my sidewalk before I even noticed the snow had fallen. His presence felt safe, dependable. So when I knocked on his door at 6:30 that evening, during the height of the snowstorm, I felt hopeful. He welcomed us in without hesitation. Inside, his basement apartment was staying warm in ways mine couldn't. Thick blankets, hot cocoa and mugs on the coffee table, Daisy curled up in a fleece throw, cozy lights hung in corners, soft Christmas music played. Jared smiled and said, "You're welcome here as long as you need." I exhaled for the first time in days. Daisy chirped, "He's like a TV dad." And Jared smiled, reaching for another mug. I nodded along, feeling guilty that relief tasted so sweet. The first night passed quietly. We shared soup and bread. I told Jared how useless the heater was. He shook his head. "This storm's no joke. Stay here until we get power back." I thanked him and kissed Daisy goodnight. I fell asleep on the couch, fuzzy mug in my hand, imagining power restored and morning warm again. I woke around midnight to the sound of snow pounding the window above the couch. Daisy stirred beside me. Jared was gone. I assumed he was shoveling again, that same calm guy who wouldn't let any ice surprise a neighbor. But when I peeked at the front door, it was locked, from the outside. That unsettled me. I tried the knob. Firm. I knocked quietly. No answer. Early morning, I woke with a stiff neck, Daisy curled against my back. Jared was home. He handed me a mug of cocoa with a soft smile. "Safe and warm," he said. But something in his eyes made me swallow hard. I noticed for the first time his mug had only broth, clear, watery broth. He said he wasn't hungry. Over pancakes, Daisy animatedly described games at daycare. I looked at Jared, watching her, lips almost twitching. "He's a good kid," he said softly. There was sincerity in his voice, but also hesitation. I started keeping an eye on the paper bags Jared brought home. He made individual portions for me and for Daisy, but not for himself. He stirred broth slowly while we ate. I blamed fatigue. We were in a storm, rations maybe. But late that night, as we brought our mugs to the sink, I caught a glimpse of scribbles on one bag, half-erased words, small notes. Safety, pure, clean. I brushed it off. That night we shared blankets. I forced a story, something cheery. Daisy listened, her eyes fluttering shut. Then Jared hummed, a soft lullaby I didn't recognize. It drifted from the dark corner where he stood, humming, watching Daisy sleep. I froze, unsure if I breathed. He stepped back and whispered, "Shh, it's okay." I closed my eyes and heard the tune in my head long after sleep. Day 3 dawned dim and cold. We'd lost power completely. I busied myself cleaning. I needed something to remove the cloying tension. As I rearranged the cushions, my hand grazed something behind the couch. It was a small notebook with a frayed spine. I pulled it out. Inside, handwriting spilled over the pages. Paranoid rants, apocalyptic theories, maps of the neighborhood with arrows pointing at houses, warnings about infection and purification. And what caught my breath? Underlined phrases next to Daisy's name. Pure, innocent, excluded, special. My heart stopped. I stared at the page. I thought of Daisy curled up on the couch, trusting us. I flipped more pages, searching for a date. No diary format, just scribbles, as if someone used it as a planning pad. My hand shook. It wasn't just odd, it was dangerous. I closed the notebook and stuffed it into my coat pocket. Jared bumped into me in the hallway and asked, "You okay?" I nodded and sank onto the sofa. He sat beside me, brows knit. "I just want you and Daisy safe," he said gently. But I remembered the locked door, the humming lullaby, the targeted notes. I swallowed hard and smiled. "Thank you, Jared." That night I stayed wide awake. Daisy snored softly beside me. I strained for sounds, anything that didn't belong to the gathered firestorm outside. At dawn, Jared said he needed to dig out the front walkway. I nodded. He stepped outside. I watched him from the window, bundled in coat and hat, shovel in hand. The blizzard had turned the street white. He slid into view, PDF bag in hand. In less than 2 minutes, I decided. I whispered to Daisy, "Mommy needs you to be brave." She rubbed sleep from her eyes. I opened the small bathroom window, unlocked the front door, and called for her. Daisy slipped through first. I followed, cutting my hand on the window's broken edge. Warm blood mixed with icy pain. But adrenaline surged. We ran across the deep snow, shuffling barefoot, until a light turned on 3 houses down. A kind woman opened her door. She called 911. She wrapped us in blankets. I told her our names. Moments later, police pulled Jared inside. He was calm. He kept repeating he was only protecting us. I watched Daisy, her face pale in a stranger's kitchen light. We sat and waited as the storm eased. In the following hours, the freezer in Jared's apartment revealed the truth. Sealed meat packages, unlabeled, frozen. Notes listing cleansing, infection zones, pure supplies. Neighbors reported Jared had stopped medication months ago. He believed the city, the storm, everyone was contaminated. His words, "The basement is a safe zone." Daisy and I were hospitalized for frostbite, her fingers swollen, my toes numb. We healed slowly. The day we were released, the counselor asked about speaking of Jared. Daisy stayed silent. I told her, "Sometimes monsters don't wear masks." Back home, the heater steamed into life, but neither of us turned the thermostat higher than 68. Every snow day, Daisy presses her ear to the window frame. Every flurry, my breath catches at the windows. I feel grateful and terrified by trust. Trust must be balanced with vigilance. Comfort and kindness can mask danger. Even in the warmest places, maintain awareness. Sometimes the greatest threat isn't outside, it's the one who invites you in. Trust your instincts, they're often wiser than appearances. You never really know what you're carrying until you're finally alone and quiet, and the weight hits you all at once. That's how it felt going into midterm break this past fall. I'd been burning through classes, trying to keep up with college applications, part-time shifts, and group projects. It was like I couldn't breathe unless something was due. Sleep had become an optional luxury, so when Luke Danvers texted me on Wednesday asking if I wanted to crash at his place that weekend, I said yes before even asking my parents. Luke and I weren't best friends, but we'd known each other since middle school. He was laid back, into horror games and sci-fi, and had a way of making even boring Friday nights feel like mini adventures. His mom was out of town visiting her sister, and he mentioned something about her leaving behind frozen pizzas and extra money for snacks. I didn't need more convincing. His house sat on Glendale Court, a little cul-de-sac near the edge of a wooded strip on the southeast side of Cedar Rapids. Clean streets, trimmed yards, the kind of place that always felt 2 steps away from a Christmas card. The townhouse itself was simple. 2 stories, gray siding, an attached balcony upstairs that faced the woods. His mom's SUV was gone when I got there, and Luke greeted me with a grin and a Red Bull in hand. "Midterm break officially starts now," he said. We spent the next few hours doing exactly what tired teenagers do best. Nothing productive. Pizza, soda, a few hours of Call of Duty, and a very dumb argument about whether ghost stories hit harder in the woods or the desert. "Desert," Luke insisted. "Worse visibility, dry wind, creepy silence." "Wrong," I said. "Wants you to guess." "Woods. Everything makes a sound, but nothing shows itself. It's like the forest." Around 10:15, we loaded up a horror game on his PS5. Something atmospheric, full of static-filled corridors and flickering lights. It was fun at first. Jump scares, cheap shrieks. But something about the house itself started to feel too quiet. Like the game was echoing into the real world. The storm windows creaked against the wind. The power didn't flicker, but I caught myself turning the hallway light on whenever I left the room. We were both jittery, half laughing, half exhausted. Luke paused the game and said, "Be the first to scream if something actually happens." "Bet you'll," I smirked. "Only if you're the second." By midnight, we'd given up on the game and sprawled out in the living room with blankets and chips. Luke had the couch. I had the floor near the sliding balcony doors. He dozed off before me, snoring lightly under a hoodie. That's when I noticed the motion sensor light on the back patio kept turning on. I stared at it for a while. It would flick on, then shut off after a minute or so, then turn on again. No sound. No figures. Just light, then dark. Over and over. I got up and peered out, expecting a raccoon or even a squirrel. But there was nothing. When I told Luke about it, he mumbled from under his blanket. "Light's super sensitive." Probably just a critter. That I didn't buy it. I went back to the floor, curled tighter into the blanket. The clock read 1:42 a.m. I remember because I looked at it just before I stood to grab chips from the kitchen. I never made it there. Halfway across the room, I froze. There was a sound. Not loud, but distinct. Whistling. A soft, slow tune. Childlike. Like something you'd hear in an old cartoon or a lullaby. Just 5 or 6 notes. Then a pause. Then again. It was coming from the living room. The couch. I peeked around the corner. There was a man sitting there, back turned, still, wearing a long dark coat. His head was slightly tilted like he was listening to his own song, and in his lap, resting loosely, was what looked like a pistol. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I whispered, "Luke." It came out as a gasp. Luke jolted awake to the sound of my voice. He shot up, baseball bat in hand, before I could even speak again. I pointed toward the couch, my mouth dry. "There's someone." He was just... I started. But the couch was empty. The room looked exactly the way we left it. Blanket folded, chips spilled on the coffee table. No man, no pistol, no sound. The back door still locked. All the windows sealed. "Dude, what are you talking about?" Luke said, still holding the bat like it was a real weapon. I swear he was sitting right there. He looked at me like I'd lost it. "Was it a dream? You fell asleep for a bit?" "No, I was awake. He was there. I heard him." We did a full sweep of the house. Every door was locked, every window secure, no signs of forced entry. But when we checked the back balcony, we found muddy boot prints, one set, leading toward the door, but not away from it. We called the cops. 2 officers came within 15 minutes. They searched the house top to bottom. No signs of anyone. One of them radioed in that it was probably a prank, or maybe I'd had a sleep hallucination. They didn't find a weapon, didn't find a man, but they did ask how long we'd lived there. "Why?" Luke asked. "Because sometimes these older units have crawl spaces. People get in, stay a while." I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Luke. The next morning, Luke's mom called. We told her everything. She didn't laugh. In fact, she told Luke something that chilled me more than anything the night before. That sensor light's been going off all week. I figured it was the wind. Luke didn't live there much longer. They moved across town within a month. New locks, alarm system, me. I tried to brush it off, but the whistle stuck with me. I couldn't hum it, couldn't replicate it, but it was there, always in the back of my mind, soft and low. Sometimes I hear it in the shower or through my headphones when the music cuts out. Always 5 or 6 notes. Then silence. I haven't slept over at anyone's house since. It's been almost a year. I'm a senior now. Better grades, better sleep. But I still remember that night like it just happened. I still see the man's silhouette in my mind. His shoulders too still. The way he whistled without lips moving. I've looked online for explanations, hallucinations, shared delusions, sleepwalking. None of them account for the boot prints, or the feeling I had, the absolute certainty that the man wasn't breaking in. He was already inside, waiting. The kind of visitor you don't invite, the kind who doesn't rush, the kind who knows you're going to sit still and listen. And sometimes when the wind cuts through my bedroom window late at night, I don't get up, I don't check. I just listen, because the melody is soft. And I think it's for me. Not all dangers make noise when they enter. Trust your senses. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Fear doesn't always come with footsteps. It sometimes hums a lullaby and waits until you're too comfortable to run. Growing up in Missouri, I always knew storms were part of the deal. You learn to tell the difference between thunder that rumbled like a distant train and the kind that cracked the sky open like a gunshot. You knew when to cancel plans and when to shrug it off. That Saturday, I should have known better. Originally, Talia was supposed to come to my place for our sleepover. We'd planned it a week in advance. Blanket fort, horror movies, the usual. But around 5 p.m., my mom called from her hotel in St. Louis. She was watching the news and insisted I stay put. Roads were flooding fast, and Columbia was getting the worst of it. The problem? I was already at Talia's. I'd gone over after a school club event, thinking we'd head to my place later. Then the city practically drowned. So I called my mom back, told her I'd stay with Talia. She wasn't thrilled, but agreed. Near the windows if the wind gets strong, she said, and stay out of the basement. Don't go, I didn't ask why about the basement. Everyone in Missouri knows why. Flooding. That night was the kind that rattled foundations. Talia's house was nothing like mine. Ours was a ranch-style home, cozy, carpeted, nothing special. Hers was older, not falling apart, but the kind with too many doors and light switches that didn't work. Hardwood floors that moaned when you shifted your weight. She lived at the end of Huntley Drive in a 2-story house that felt like it should have a name, not just a number. I remember the rain starting slow, like it was building suspense. By the time we finished dinner and settled on the couch with fuzzy socks and microwave popcorn, the thunder was coming in regular intervals, deep, rolling, almost rhythmic. At around 9:20 p.m., the lights flickered. "You pay your electric bill?" I joked. Talia smirked but didn't laugh. Substations or something. They said on the news the grid's acting weird. Flooded. We tried to ignore it, putting on some cheesy 2000s horror movie. Teenagers screaming in the woods. But I couldn't focus. Something about the house, maybe the air pressure, made it feel like we weren't really alone. At 10:30, the power gave out entirely. The screen blinked off mid-scream. Darkness swallowed the room. Outside, the lightning turned the windows into strobe lights. For a second, neither of us said anything. We just listened. Talia got up and started digging through drawers for candles. I helped. We lit 4, 1 for the kitchen, 2 for the living room, and a small one for the hallway. Their glow didn't reach far, but they gave the space a kind of safety net. Like as long as we had light, we'd be fine. To distract ourselves, we started telling ghost stories. We recycled old ones. Bloody Mary, The man under the bed, the woman who only walks backward. We laughed at ourselves. But then I started hearing it. Creaks. Not from the wind, not from the floor shifting. These were soft but steady. Above us. Footsteps. Long, dragging ones, like someone walking slowly to not wake a baby. "Talia," I said. She froze, candle in her hand. "I hear it too." "Is anyone else home?" She shook her head. "No. Mom and Dad are in Branson. Brothers at college." I didn't want to say what I was thinking. Someone was upstairs. Thunder cracked again, and the footsteps stopped. We looked at the ceiling like we could see through it. Then came the thud. Not a bang, not a crash, just a heavy footfall in the upstairs hallway. "This isn't the wind," she whispered. We didn't talk after that. We just moved. Candle in hand, I followed her to the downstairs guest room. We shut the door and locked it. It didn't feel like enough. Not by a long shot. The house was too old, too many entrances and exits, too many ways for someone to already be inside. I checked my phone. No bars, not even a single flicker of signal. I texted my mom anyway. "Storm's bad, staying safe." Message undelivered. For a while we sat on the bed, backs to the wall, eyes on the door. Then the doorknob moved. It wasn't violent, just a soft jiggle, like someone testing it, turning it gently, as if trying not to make noise. Talia covered her mouth with her hand. I felt my heart climbing into my throat. I wanted to call out, "Who's there?" But I didn't. Whoever it was, they already knew we were there. The knob stilled. Silence returned. Minutes passed, then more. Eventually we heard a faint creak, like retreating footsteps. But we didn't move. Talia whispered, "There's an attic crawl space. My brother told me it connects above the hallway, maybe into the guest room closet. It's old, barely used. Are you telling me someone could have been living up there?" She looked pale. I thought he was kidding, to scare me. I didn't want to ask the next question, but I had to. When was the last time anyone checked it? Not since we moved in, last spring. We didn't sleep. Every sound outside felt like it came from inside. At one point I thought I heard breathing through the vent. When the storm passed around 6 a.m., we opened the door together. Nothing in the hallway. No noise. The house felt colder. Still, I didn't let go of the flashlight I'd kept beside me all night. When the police arrived later that morning, they searched every inch of the house. They found what we feared. The attic crawlspace latch had been broken, pried from the inside. There were dirty footprints across the hallway ceiling panel and along the guest room closet frame. Someone had been up there. They didn't find him. No fingerprints, no ID. Just signs. A blanket in the crawlspace, empty wrappers, a flashlight. He could have been up there for days, weeks, waiting. We never talked about it much after that. Talia's family moved within a month. I understood why. That house didn't feel empty anymore, it felt watched. As for me, I can't hear thunder the same way. It's not the noise that scares me. It's the silence between the rumbles. The silence that once held footsteps. Sometimes what protects us, doors, locks, even walls, are only illusions of safety. Real danger doesn't always announce itself. It listens, waits, and moves when you think you're alone. Trust your instincts. They're often the only warning you'll get. I still remember how the smell of strawberry gum mixed with incense hit me the moment I stepped inside Jenny's duplex at 2238 and 16th Street. It was early spring in Boise, cool enough that every breath looked like smoke in the air, but warm enough to make my jacket unnecessary by evening's end. I had only known Jenny Callahan for 2 weeks, but she radiated that effortless confidence that draws people in. When she invited me to a sleepover, I said yes, without hesitation. I'd transferred here mid-semester and still felt like an outsider. I needed friends. I needed to feel normal again. Her mom, Patrice, greeted me with a quiet smile and eyes that wandered like she was searching for something I couldn't see. "It's good you're here," she said softly, almost to herself. The living room walls were lined with black and white family photos. Each portrait looked serious, no wedding day teeth baring. And there was incense burning in a corner, the aroma sticky and deep like old books. We started with music and snacks, chips, soda, gum, and I relaxed into the routine of teenage laughter and shared secrets. Jenny pulled out several polishes, pink, purple, glitter. We set up on the carpet, switching chairs, humming along to playlists she'd made. I'd almost forgotten how fun something so simple could feel after months of feeling out of place. But then, around 10 now, Patrice slipped into the room, trailing behind her a faint patter of whispering. She didn't say hello, just hovered. I felt a prickle. Jenny kept painting my nails and didn't invite her in. Patrice left as silently as she came. "Mom's into spiritual stuff," Jenny whispered. "Helps her stay calm or whatever." She offered me more gum, strawberry flavor. I snapped the package open, the smell so strong it made my head spin. That night, I didn't realize I was already watching. And I didn't know fear could come from silence until that silence was broken. At 10:45, I heard the first shift, a soft shuffle behind the couch. I glanced up and found Patrice standing in the corner, eyes half closed. She was muttering under her breath at the circle of lit candles surrounding a photo of a man I assumed was Jenny's dad. The candles flickered, casting tall, alive shadows on the walls. "You see him?" Patrice whispered, but I couldn't tell if she was asking Jenny or addressing someone unseen. Jenny's voice wobbled. "Mom, please, stop." But she didn't sound angry, just afraid. I didn't say anything. My nails felt wet and warm under the polish, and my seat suddenly felt off balance, like I might tip if I moved too fast. Patrice turned to me. Her eyes were wide, distant. "He's still in the house. He has not left." Jenny snapped, "Mom, shut up." She turned to me, mouth pinched. "Ignore her." And I did, until after midnight. I woke to humming. Quiet, steady, low in the hallway. I recognized it from church aisles, from old ladies in wheelchairs. I wondered if I'd dreamed it. But when I rolled over, I saw the glow of candlelight seeping under the bathroom door. I crept out. The hallway was dark, the carpet soft under my socks. At the far end, Patrice knelt, the photo of Jenny's father in front of her face. A butcher knife clutched in one hand, another stirring the air like a conductor. She whispered, "He wants Jenny to listen." Suddenly, I felt like I'd tumbled into a room with no walls. My throat closed. She didn't notice me retreating. And when I got to the bathroom, I locked the door and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The hallway echoed with louder whispering, door frames shifting, and the scent of incense overwhelming the small space. I pressed the receiver to my ear, my voice thin as I told the operator what was happening. "Yes, ma'am. She thinks she can hear him. She's trying to make her daughter go into the closet." I held the phone so tight I thought it might crack. I dropped to the floor, sliding along the wall, breathing slow. The glass shattered. I heard footsteps on the other side. Patrice's voice cracked through the door. "Jenny, you need to go inside. You're the one he can touch." Fear and adrenaline raced. I said, "Officers are on the way." "Yes, ma'am, but hurry." Then the operator whispered. There was a crash behind me, a picture frame tossed against the wall, its black and white photo shattering. The incense flare sputtered out. The air turned heavy, thick with burning wood and terror. Moments later, voices outside. The door flew open and Patrice fell backward. Jenny stumbled behind her, wide-eyed and pale. Officers ran in, shouting commands about knives, breaking up the chaos. I followed the beam of a flashlight out and into the living room where glass and candles littered the floor. Jenny's doll lay face down in the center of the mess, arms outstretched. Patrice refused to calm. They carried her out. Jenny's ears were on fire trying to remember. her real name. They shuffled her out barefoot, still yanking at the hem of her pajamas. Jenny held her head in shaking arms, staring. One officer took my statement. They helped me home. It was nearly dawn when my mom picked me up. I locked the car but stayed frozen until we passed Jenny's duplex. The next school day, the gossip started by lunchtime. I didn't run from it. I walked through the hallways and felt eyes burning, curious, pitying. My friends asked if I was okay. I answered in short sentences. My hands shook if I didn't hold something, a binder or a pen. Everything smelled like strawberry gum or incense, and I couldn't stand either. Counseling came next. I talked about fear, about sleeping in my own house again, about closing closets and locking bathroom doors from the inside. I still didn't trust first impressions or strangers, even people I thought I knew. Jenny transferred to her aunt's house in Oregon. I never saw her again, but I still feel ashamed I didn't help more, that I didn't go with her, that the night our sleepover cracked open, I only thought of myself. Weeks later, I passed the duplex. Patrice's car was gone. The curtains were drawn. A new scent wafted out. I think it was fresh paint, or maybe just the wind clearing in the spring. Later, I learned from a school counselor that Patrice had untreated schizophrenia after her husband's sudden death. She believed his soul lingered, waiting to be appeased. And in that ecstasy of grief, real life, the thing you do to live, disappeared. I learned that mental illness doesn't always come with warnings. Sometimes it just waits in someone you trust. Years later, I still can't walk past a black and white photo hung without a frame. Can't smell strawberry gum without a sudden twist in my chest. Can't be in someone else's home too long. I don't sleep over anymore. But I learned something that night. I learned that families don't need ghosts to be haunted. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't in a closet. It's in someone's mind, and in the parts of their grief that no one helps them face. Haunting doesn't only come from spirits or old houses. It sometimes lives in sorrow, in silence, in untreated grief. Listen to the quiet. Notice the closed doors. Some doors shouldn't be opened alone. And the real strength is in reaching out before the shadows break in.